Entropy, the phenomenon that our universe is moving toward disorder. Planets are shifting, Earth is slowing down, mountains shake, grass withers and flowers fade, life dies. But in an amazing turn of events, one man flipped that law of entropy upside down. He cast out demons. He silenced the storm. He fed the 5,000. He healed a woman from a long-term illness. He healed a paralytic. He even walked on water. But this same man was betrayed, beaten, and battered beyond all recognition. Inevitable death choked the breath from his lungs and bled out the blood from his body. But then, fully and completely dead, this man, 3 days deep into the void of eternal sleep, reversed entropy once again from beyond his own grave. He took back his own breath, restarted his own heart, and fulfilled his divine mission with prophetic precision and moved from entropy to miracle, darkness to light, destruction to restoration, decay to beauty, despair to hope, from death to life. And if a man would have the power to overcome his own death, how much more would he have the power to overcome our death, overcome our pain, overcome our suffering, and reverse the effects of disorder on our own lives and bring us back to life, the life that comes after death, resurrection, life. Church, let's declare this morning. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Not death. Oh, who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty?
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to those who are watching by live stream. Glad that you're able to watch us by live stream. We've had an amazing time of celebration in here. And also to those who are over in the Life Center, welcome. Glad you guys are able to be a part of our service in another part of our building. Guys, wasn't that opening by Josh pretty amazing? Wasn't that just, amen, wow. And guys, haven't you just really enjoyed all our worship team and their ministry this morning? I'm so grateful for that team. Amen. It was almost a year ago to this day that I got a call late at night from my mom, and she said, "Brian, I think I'm having a heart attack." And indeed she was, and it was a big one, and we wound up getting her rushed to the ER room. The next day she wound up having heart surgery, and 5 days later she died. I should say 5 days later she went home to be with Jesus, because that's exactly what happened for her. But then right after that was Easter, and I had to come up with an Easter message after Mom died. And what happened for me is my heart was really drawn to the resurrection of Lazarus. I was thinking about all the people that we care about and we love and we miss, and just what God has in store for them. And so I wound up preaching on the resurrection of Lazarus, of course, by the mighty power of Jesus. That's not typically what you do on Easter. Well, so for the second Easter Sunday as the lead pastor, I'm going to get back to Jesus, and we're going to talk about the resurrection of Jesus today. But I'm aware that when we talk about the resurrection, we do have a challenge that we have to deal with. And that is very simply, you and I live on the other side of Good Friday and resurrection. We know that the cross was not the end. We know that the crucifixion was not the end. We know that the death of Jesus was not the end of the story. We know resurrection is coming. It's coming fast, it's coming soon, and it's coming strong. Now, we know that. But the first disciples did not know that. That first group of disciples, was the core 12, but plus many others. All they knew was death. They knew defeat. They knew disillusionment. They knew despair. They knew doubt. They knew that all their hopes had come crumbling down and everything was now lost. That's what they were experiencing. And I want you to keep in mind that these were the folks that they had wrapped their lives around Jesus for 3 long years. They walked with him wherever he went. They participated in his ministry and his teaching. They saw him do these spectacular miracles. They saw him do wondrous things that had never been done in Israel before. They heard his wise teachings about life and how life can be so much better than what it was. They saw him confront the powers that be who were against the people, and they saw how tenderly and lovingly he came alongside those who were hurting the most. They wrapped their lives around all these things with Jesus. And now Jesus is gone, and all they are left with is their grief. Now, we know this because Judas went out and with great remorse, he killed himself almost right away because of what he had done with this. We read another story. There were 2 of the disciples. They said, well, now that Jesus is gone, we might as well make our way back to our village, our old way of life. And so they're walking back to Emmaus, and on the road they meet a stranger, and the stranger says, why are you so downcast? And they wind up saying, well, are you the only one who doesn't know what's been going on in Jerusalem? And they tell him about Jesus dying, and we had hoped about him, but now hope is gone. See, that's what happens when important things die for us. The rest of the disciples, they were back in Jerusalem. They were hiding. They were fearful. They were concerned. They were confused. They were lost. Faith had evaporated. It had disappeared. It had vanished. Oh, and then there's doubting Thomas. Thomas the doubter becomes Thomas the unbeliever. He moves into full, sheer unbelief about Jesus. And that's where they were after Good Friday. See, that's what happens when things we love die. That's what happens when people we love die. When God goes away, grief overwhelms us. When faith and hope are gone, then the emotions that are dark, they just consume us. The wind is knocked out of the sail. The breath is gone from the body. The light dims from the eye. The spring in the step becomes feet of lead. And the cherished dreams turn out to be nothing more than dust in the wind. That's what they were experiencing after Good Friday, because Easter had not yet happened. Now, the person we're going to look at today, her name is Mary of Magdalene. Now, she's called Mary of Magdalene because she was from the town of Magdala. Magdala was a thriving town on the coast of Galilee. The town was thriving, but Mary of Magdalene, she was not thriving. In fact, her life was horrible. Her life was painful. Her life was tormented by these dark, demonic powers of life. And on one of his many traveling tours, Jesus made his way to Galilee, and he was introduced to Mary Magdalene there by the Sea of Galilee. And so he found her and found she was consumed by these entities, and he cast them out of her life. Her sanity was restored. Her life was returned for her, and she became one of those who chose to wrap also her life around this one called Jesus. In the Gospels, Mary of Magdalene is mentioned 14 different times. That's how prominent she is. The only woman in the Gospels that has more prominence than Mary of Magdalene is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And when it comes to the resurrection, Mary of Magdalene has the preeminent spot for the resurrection. Now in John chapter 20, Mary, who had wrapped her life around Jesus, she misses him so much. By herself, she goes to the tomb. She knows he's dead, but she at least wants to be close to his remains, as close as she can get. And when she gets there, she finds something very unexpected. She finds the stone has been rolled away, and she looks in and she sees that the tomb is empty. Bewildered, confused, she runs back to Jerusalem, goes hunting for the disciples, and finds them and says his body is gone. Well, two of the disciples right away begin running back to the tomb. One is Peter, the other we know is John. And they get there and they look in and they see indeed that the tomb is empty. There's no body of Jesus. There are only some of the grave clothing of Jesus that are lying there. And they're perplexed, and we see that they believe, but we're not exactly sure what it means that they were believing. Believing what? Because in the very next verse, John says they had not yet understood that Jesus was to be risen from the dead. They didn't know that he was resurrected. They just knew he wasn't there. So they knew something was going on, but they really didn't know too much. And that's where we pick up the story for this morning. In verse 11 and 12, see, Mary gets back there. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying, and she wept. She bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. Mary stood outside the tomb, and Mary wept. You know, the other disciples, they looked in and they saw the tomb was empty, and they didn't know what to do, and they just went back. They went back to the city. Not Mary. Mary waited, because that's what love does. Mary abided. Mary remained. And Mary wept, because that's what love does also. You see, when faith and hope are gone, love still lingers, but love lingers with tears. Love lingers with ache. Love lingers with pain. Love lingers with the ache of loneliness. But love lingers on after faith and hope have disappeared. Mary stood there, and Mary waited, and Mary wept. And she sees two angelic presences, and here's what's really striking is she is so overcome by her grief, she is so overcome by her loss that she doesn't even recognize that there are angels in there. And there's a little conversation. The angels ask her, why is she crying? And she says, well, they've taken away the body of Jesus. I no longer even have his body to mourn over. Now we pick it back up in verse 14. At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not realize that it was Jesus. And so he asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for? And thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him. Jesus has showed up. Resurrection has manifested itself. Life is there, and she doesn't recognize Jesus. Because that's what happens. When God disappears, grief overwhelms. When our lives are so overcome with the trauma of what we have lost. She can't even recognize life. And doesn't that happen to you and I? We get so focused on entropy and all that we've lost and all that we are losing and all that we are missing that when resurrection shows up in our life, and it does show up, we don't even recognize it because we are so fixated on entropy and death. Until Jesus calls our name. Now, that's the name of a wonderful book that I know many of you have read, Jesus Calling. And that's what Jesus does for Mary. He calls her name. You know where that comes from? It comes from John chapter 10, where Jesus talks about he is the good shepherd, and his sheep hear his voice, his sheep recognize his voice, and when he calls out by name, his sheep, his followers, his people respond. So Jesus winds up calling. We read in verse 16, Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher, my teacher. Jesus says, Mary. She says, my teacher. Now, before I go on to verse 17, I'd like to suggest that there is a long pause between verse 16 and verse 17. There is a lot going on between verse 16 and 17. There is a lot taking place between Jesus saying in verse 16, Mary, and what he's going to say to her in verse 17. Here's what he says to her in verse 17. Jesus said, do not hold on to me. He first says, Mary, and then right away says, do not hold on to me. Well, I don't think he said it right away. I think there was a long pause in between there. Some of you might be thinking about those older translations, which I read as well, where the translation said, Jesus says, Mary, do not touch me. Don't touch me, Mary. Frankly, I think that's a bad translation, and it's a worse interpretation. It's horrible spirituality. I mean, what were those old translators thinking? That Jesus was some kind of disembodied ghost and her hand would go through him? That his body was so resurrected pure that it would be sullied by humanity touching it? No, that's not true. I mean, Jesus, in just a little bit, he's going to come up to Thomas and say, Thomas, touch me right here, feel. The resurrected Jesus is full of physicality. He is full of embodied encounters. Well, in just a little bit, he is going to have a fish cookout by the campfire with his best friends. Jesus would have never said, Mary, don't touch me. He said, Mary, don't hold on to me. Why did he say, Mary, don't hold on to me? Well, have you ever watched any YouTube videos of a soldier returning home unexpectedly? Have you ever seen any of those videos? Now, you know, a lot of the family is clued into this, and there's going to be a surprise, but usually one important family member doesn't know that the soldier is returning home unexpectedly. Usually it's the spouse, and you know, and that it means a wife or a fiance. Sometimes it's the mom. It's never the dad. It's the mom. Sometimes it's a son or daughter. And when you watch those videos of the unexpected return home surprise visit from the soldier, the person jumps up with unbelievable astonishment and joy and tears, and they just wrap their arms around the surprise soldier returning home, and they don't let go. That's what Mary has done to Jesus. She has wrapped her arms so tight around him, and she is just holding and hugging and squeezing. And I think it comes to the point where Jesus, Mary, let me catch my breath. You can let go. It's okay. It's really me. I'm here. You know, one of my favorite YouTube videos was about an older brother who comes home. And he comes home, and his younger kid brother, I think the kid brother's probably in like second or third grade, and he's in school. And so the older brother in his military uniform comes walking into the class, and the little brother looks up, and the little brother is almost befuddled and bewildered with joy. He just gets up, and this little kid he's about half as tall as his big brother. He wraps his arms around his big brother, and he will not let go. He's not embarrassed by his show of affection. He's not embarrassed by his tears. He is just elated that big brother is home. Oh, guys, I just cry when I watch those videos. I turned in my man card a long time ago. Men, when you come to know Jesus, you just rip that thing up and throw it away. You don't need it anymore. That's what Mary was experiencing. Let me say it in this way. It was a VE Day moment for Mary. You know what VE Day was? 1945. The Allies won the war, World War II. Germany surrendered. It is Victory in Europe Day. Now, if you want to, after you're done Googling a couple of those soldier returning home videos, you just check out VE Day, look for images, and you're going to see picture after picture of euphoric celebration, pandemonium of the best kind erupting all throughout the cities of Europe. There are celebrations and cheer and smiles and astonishment. The Europe is just going wild with delight, because the enemy has been defeated. Mary is having a kind of a VE Day, but let's just call it a VJ Day, a Victory of Jesus Day. You know, we just don't have those kinds of national celebrations of delight and rejoicing about the magnificent news of a wonderful victory. Unless you want to count the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I don't know. That was your VE Day, Victory of Eagles Day, but there'll never be another one like that. Anyway. Mary's having a VJ Day, Victory of Jesus Day. Her life has just changed incredibly, irrevocably, wonderfully. It'll never be the same again. But even that's not quite good enough to help us understand all that she is experiencing. We have to go back to another story a little further back, and it is about another battle, another war. This was one of the most famous battles in all of history, and it's the Battle of Waterloo, June 18, 1815. The British General Wellington crosses the English Channel with the British troops, and they're going to fight against the would-be emperor of all Europe, Napoleon. And it's going to be the Battle of Waterloo, and it will be one of the most important battles ever fought on European soil. Now, you have to remember back then, we didn't have the 24-hour news going all the time, giving us constant updates. There wasn't any internet service to keep us clued in. We didn't have cell phones. They didn't have telegraph back then to get updates in terms of how the battle was going. You know what they had is they had sentries stationed on different boats, and they would just relay the message, boat by boat until the word finally came to somebody on a tower citadel on the coast of England to hear what is the news of the battle. And the first word came relayed across the channel, Wellington. And then the second word came, defeated. End of message. And a thick, heavy fog descended on all the English Channel. And word of the defeat of Wellington spread like wildfire through England. London moved into the doom of despair. Wellington, their hero, had lost to that Napoleon tyrant. 3 hours later, the fog lifts. And 2 more words come through. What were those words? The enemy. What was the message? Wellington defeated the enemy. And all of England went from the despair of defeat to the euphoria of victory in a moment. Now that's what Mary is experiencing. Because Good Friday, here was the message: Jesus defeated. End of message. End of story. And for 3 days, darkness descended upon the lives of everybody who knew Jesus. But on the third day, the darkness began to lift. And the rest of the message came through. Jesus defeated the enemy. Jesus defeated death. Jesus defeated the grave. Jesus defeated hell. Jesus defeated Satan. Jesus defeated entropy. Jesus defeated everything that has ever been raised up against life. Jesus defeated the enemy. Amen. Now, Mary is experiencing all of that between verse 16 and 17. I love the English language. We have these words, and then there are these little prefixes we can add. So you have the word reversible, and you take a little prefix, IR, you tack it onto the beginning, and reversible becomes irreversible. Entirely different meaning. You take the word breakable, and you put the little UN, and so breakable becomes unbreakable. You take the word penetrable, you put a little IM, it becomes impenetrable. These little prefixes exactly change to the opposite the meaning of the word. Good Friday was catastrophe. Catastrophe of the worst kind imaginable. You take the word catastrophe and you put another little prefix on it. It's called EU. It's very, very rare. And catastrophe of Good Friday becomes the eucatastrophe of Easter. The unbelievably, horribly bad news of Good Friday becomes the wonderfully good news of the very best kind of Easter. Easter is eucatastrophe. Jesus is alive. That's what Mary was experiencing between verse 16 and verse 17. And that's why she was holding on tight. She was holding on so tight, and she was not about to let go of resurrected life. Until Jesus said, Mary, you got to stop holding me. You got to stop holding. And we look at verse 17. And we see why she has to stop holding Jesus. Because he has a message for her. And he has a mission for her. Mary, stop holding me. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. Mary, I'm here, but not for real long. So go to my brothers. Now listen, that is an extraordinarily important phrase right there. Go to my brothers. When the disciples 3 long years ago began to follow Jesus, when they became his disciples, they started out as students and as servants of the master. But Jesus never intended for them to remain only students and servants. So by the time we get to John 15, Jesus is saying to them, I no longer call you servants. You are far more than that. You are my friends. So a servant had Jesus as a master, a friend has Jesus as a friend. Here Jesus takes it even further. He doesn't say to Mary, listen, go tell my servants. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say to Mary, go tell my friends. He doesn't even say that. He says, Mary, go tell my brothers. What does that make Jesus? A brother as well. Go tell my brothers, go tell my sisters, go tell the family that I'm going back to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. Do you know what this means? Do you know what the resurrection means? Do you know what the life that has come out of the tomb means? It means you and I have an intimacy with Jesus Christ that is simply unimaginable. That's why I think maybe my favorite video of all those of soldiers returning home is the older brother and the kid brother. That kid brother is holding on to his elder brother and he is not going to let go. And that's exactly what you and I do. We need to hold on to our elder brother Jesus in unimaginable intimacy and friendship, joy and delight. He is our elder brother. It is a simply unimaginable good news of the gospel. That is how close God has moved into personal relationship with you and I. But Mary has to get going. She has a message and she has a mission. Verse 18, so Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. By the way, Peter and John, you didn't see the Lord because you left way too soon. But I waited. Women, aren't you the ones who are always waiting? But you see what happens when love waits? Love gets what it waits for. Mary got what she waited for, what she had lost hope for. She got what she waited for. And so she became the first one to be sent with the good news. Here's the final word that John has for us. In verses 30 to 31, as he's wrapping up this chapter and all these stories of resurrection, he says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples. And I haven't even had space to record them in this book, but these things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is Messiah, the Son of God. That you might believe that Jesus is Messiah, the Son of God. And when you believe that, you begin to have life in his name. 44 years ago, I came to believe that Jesus was the resurrected Messiah of God. So Mary came to believe 2,000 years ago. And she became the first believer in the resurrection, and she went on, and soon the disciples became the believers, and soon even Thomas the unbeliever became a believer in the resurrected Jesus. And they began to take that message everywhere. And we brought that message to you again today. And I know some of you already here believe. I'm so glad that you believe. I hope that you're going to believe even more firmly today, just this resurrection life that our elder brother, Jesus, the Son of God, has. There's probably a number of you here that you might be interested in Jesus, you might be wondering about Jesus, but you haven't yet had a chance to say to Jesus, Jesus, I believe. Today would be a great day to start believing in the resurrected Jesus. And all you really have to do in your heart, in your mind, just some sort of words, but the heart attitude is most important. Jesus, I do believe. And I do believe you're crucified, and I do believe you have risen from the dead. I believe that you are resurrection life, and I want you in my life. And if you pray a prayer like that, then something wonderful, marvelous, beyond your imagining has taken place. Jesus has become your elder brother. God has become your father. And what we're going to have over the next 2 months is a series of times together where we're just going to explore what is this life like that we have believing in the resurrection. I hope you guys will wind up coming back many, many times over the next 2 months. Just together, let's pursue the life that we have with Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Let me pray for you and send you on your way. Lord, thank you so much for being the resurrected Lord of life. Thank you for destroying entropy. Help us to believe in you and to this week move into the glorious, beautiful resurrection life that you have given to us. Lord, we love you so much. Thank you so much for everything. We all together in your name say amen and amen. Happy Easter with your family. We'll see you next Sunday.